Shalom, everybody. Welcome to our weekly class. I pray that you guys are doing well. I'm gonna pause here the music here. Give me 1 second as we move. Perfect. All right. Hope everybody's doing okay. We are in the middle of a study. Let's see if you all can see me here tonight. I want to make sure that the audio is good, that everybody could hear. Yeah, I think everybody could hear. Okay, I think we are good to go. Hi, everybody. Think you could see me. I'm going to try to, there we go. I think that's a little bit better. Hope everybody's doing well. I know that it's been a very busy couple of weeks. I don't know about you, but it's been for us over here. Definitely in the cruise homestead, it's been quite busy between Rose's appointments and catching up with some things here in the home front as well. Getting ready for hurricane season. I don't know if you're aware, but this week is the hurricane preparedness tax-free week. I know that with all the news that are going on, that's kind of gotten lost. So if you need to catch up on your batteries, check if you have a generator and you need to go ahead and check that the oil is changed. If you used it last year, make sure everything's clean. Make sure that you kickstart it, run it. Make sure you got your gas cans ready to go. Organize all your stuff. And that's where I've been cleaning up in our garage, getting things organized because I don't have the extra pair of hands to help me anymore. So usually we prepare, but I usually have Rose helping me out and getting stuff and going to the store kind of systematically, making sure that we have enough of the things that are needed in case of a storm. I know that we had one a few years ago that took power away from us for quite a while, and they're talking about this hurricane season to be very active. So, getting all my hurricane shutters organized, making sure that I have everything that we need, that we have the drill bits where they need to be, all that good stuff that we just want to make sure that we get ready for. That's what we're doing. So between that and going over school stuff, that's also been quite crazy. Just going back into school, we're learning a lot more through the scriptures, which is exciting always. And then we just had a great visit this weekend. My son Jonathan came by, and he spent a few hours with us, and he brought a friend, and they both actually shared a time of worship with us that we sort of impromptu, we recorded. We didn't know. It was like, hey, let's just record this, while we're at it. And, we did that for the closing of the Shabbat on Saturday. So we had Pentecost this weekend, and all its wonderful party type, teaching filled excitement alongside the news. And I'm just going to say, we just need to be watchful. We need to be very scriptural in our opinions, because our citizenship is not of here. We don't, we are here in this world, yes, but the government and the systems and the people they participate too much in this world, and they don't align themselves morally to the theocracy of a king, of our king. And so there's some things I know will annoy you, some things that will upset you. I know it does to me, but we have to keep a level head, and we have to just know that we must do the right thing. Every individual, we are responsible to do the right thing, and most of the times, the right thing is not the popular choice. Just because everybody else thinks one way doesn't mean that that is what we align with, and that is the most difficult part of all this is knowing that many times these things just lead us to a self-serving mindset. I just I'm going to say this tad bit, not to go into a 2-hour comment about it, but I was listening today in the newscasters on CBS this morning. They brought in somebody from the New York Post to talk about the racial tensions, that are happening and all this stuff. And in few words, she said something where the newscasters agreed, which is basically everybody should be very understanding about the looting and the destroying of items. Although that is bad, but that is not as bad as losing a human life. Losing a human life is much terrible. That things can be replaced, and it's not as bad. And we have to understand where it comes from. It comes from a group of people that are looking to draw attention, because truth is, if people would not be burning places down and destroying public property or private property and causing the disruptions that they're causing in a way that still looks like looting, criminalizing, vandalizing, theft, then the news media would not be giving the coverage. Therefore, we should understand that it's necessary, because if it was not for that, then people really would not be paying attention to what's happening. So the newscasters were pretty much in agreement about it. In my mind, watching people run out with a air fryer, with flat screen TVs, trying to drill open cash registers at a Target, trying to hammer their way through a cash register, trying to load an ATM machine into a city bus that they grabbed, those kind of things are just not, I don't see how that speaks about people who are trying to draw attention to the news. For myself, I think, I'm looking at some business owners who had just already been through enough because of the coronavirus, struggling, putting together a business and establishing themselves in a neighborhood, to now see it burn to the ground because we just want to draw some attention to a very important issue, but we're not well organized enough that now, instead of organizing ourselves very well, making a very strong statement, we must burn somebody else's property. Well, this is what I have to say about that. I have to say that you may have a point in marketing. When we speak about the idea that sometimes violence, burning down something, destroying property will draw some news time attention, maybe. I could see that where the logic is. But I would offer this as a solution. If you want to draw the attention to the message that you want to give, I would suggest that you go ahead and light up a match in your own home, burn your house with everything in it. Do not call 911 and sit in front of your house. Call the news. Don't call the police. Don't call the fire department. Call the news and tell them that you're making a statement as a result of the death of a person, and that you're burning your property so that you want them to know, that call attention, that this is not right, and you want to burn your own house. You want to burn your own car. You want to destroy your own business. I think that if that is your mindset, that if we destroy something and burn something and hurt somebody, why don't you do it to yourself, to your own property, to your own business, to your own livelihood, to your own family, and then sit in front of it as you're looking at it burn to the ground, and tell the news while it's burning in the background. Tell the news about why you're doing it. And I think that the more people that do that definitely is going to cause an effect, in the news, because they're going to say, wow, these people really, really, really believe in what they're saying. They're burning down their own property as a protest. They're not burning down somebody else's property. They're not burning down somebody else's business. They're not burning down somebody else's home. They're not burning out somebody else's car or a private property that does not belong to them. Burn your own car. Burn your own truck. Burn your own van. Hey, burn your own bicycle or skateboard. If that's what you got, you want to make a real statement, burn it. Burn it, and let people see that you're willing to walk on foot to work the next day as a result of the protest. Let people know that, what, I am carless, I am homeless, I am jobless, I am businessless because I was making a statement. Do that. I'm sure that if that is what you think that you have gained drawing that type of attention, then I believe that somebody then will probably listen, because if that's what it takes, I'm just going by what I heard this morning. If that's what it takes, and that's the idea behind it, the explanation that we must understand why, and we must be very understanding, and because truth is nobody will pay attention, then if we're going with that statement, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to agree with you, then how about we burn your place down? How about those that feel very strongly about this? Then graffiti your own property. Graffiti your own car. Don't go and destroy somebody else's property. Destroy your own. And watch, because there's a point here. If there are so many of you that want to destroy this, to draw that kind of attention. Because in no ways in the news, in that interview today, was explained that the people who are doing the peaceful demonstrations are different than the people who are the instigators, which the general public is beginning to say, listen, the protesters are not at fault here. The ones at fault are the instigators, the criminalizers, the ones that are weaving themselves into this group and trying to do things that they're not even part of the protest. They're doing all these things to disrupt. But the news is now communicating that actually we should be understanding that this is part, and they're all one and the same. So for those people that feel that burning it down, I'm not talking about the protesters, I'm talking about those that feel that burning it down is what's going to draw the right attention, then I welcome that hypothesis with some evidence where you are burning your own place and doing damage to your own property. And then sitting in front of it, watch it burn to the ground, just watch it be destroyed. Call the news. Don't call 911 to rescue you. Don't call the fire department to take, to quench the fire. Just let it burn. Call the news and let them then draw the spotlight to you, which is what you're saying that this is about. It's about drawing the spotlight into an issue. So, having said that, it's terrible that we still live in an age where we don't know how to treat a human being. And we treat human beings by how we categorize them in our brains, by color or race or social status. We make these assumptions in so many ways, and we're not calling anyone innocent. I think that there is a very basic form of respect. He was subdued. He could have been put in a patrol car. And I don't know. That's where, when we are trying to demonstrate a show of force, which that's the term, show of force, I don't think that we have learned how to do this. Nas Daily, the famous YouTuber Nas Daily, pointed out an interesting video blog about how, a doctor who is dealing with issues of life and death takes about 10 to 12 years to go to school before he could practice on his own license, on his own merit. And yet police in many places around the world, sometimes all it takes is about 5 months of training. And they're there to protect and serve. I think that there's something to be said when we talk about, the aspect of the kind of pressure, the kind of fortitude that a police officer must have, which I think that not anybody can be one. I mean, I think that you have to have a calling for that, literally a calling. And so I can't, they go through so many things. When these issues happen, it's hard to determine whether this was a mistake, an accidental, or was this negligence. And there's a difference between accidental and negligence. Accidental was you didn't really know what you were doing. Negligence is more of, I knew what I knew what I was doing. I was subduing him with my knee, and he choked. I didn't watch. I didn't keep tabs. I didn't make sure he was still breathing. I didn't pay attention to my forceful, pressure on him to subdue him, to make sure he was okay. When I used to work in a crisis unit, I remember that when we took self-defense and safety training, the priority was that when we subdued a patient and we had to subdue them, it was a crisis unit. In this case, it was because of mental illness. When we subdued them, it was because of two issues: their protection and the protections of everybody else. So we had to protect them and protect everybody. So even the methods of subduing a client were methodical, and they were designed to limit any physical harm to them or to anybody else. And that if we had to subdue that person was because either that person was in danger of themselves or that they were in danger of others. It's a different environment. Policing is different. I'm not comparing it. I'm just saying that in self-defense, there are terms where the goal is to do that. So, yes, there has to be a reform. There has to be something looked at all across the globe. I think that this is a global issue, not a state or United States only issue. I think that if you pay attention to the news around the world, it happens everywhere. It just happens in different forms. Racism is not necessarily what people call it. Here we made a very political token and we overuse it. In some places, people are the same but they're of a different caste. Now we get into a different language, right? So there are some things to look at when we see this, and definitely, if there is something to pray for, is to pray that the leaders of this, rather than turning this into a political move, turn this into an opportunity to seek wisdom, to finally find ways to bring solutions to a long problem, a problem that's been existing for too long. All right, that's it. That's my bit. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I know it's all over the place, but I figured that a lot of people were probably wondering, is he going to say something about it? What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to march? Are we not supposed to march? Listen, you have the right to march. This is what I say. Remember that wherever you go, you have to represent the Almighty. So you have to set the tone of what you're doing wherever you're going to be at. And you cannot partake or even seem like you're in agreement, because that's the whole issue within the scriptures, is that we don't look like the rest of the world. We cannot look like everybody else. If you look like everybody else in what you're doing, then you are dismissing the holiness of God. Okay? So if you want to go out there and partake of that, to go for it. Go and do it and represent, but represent. Okay? Represent. Make sure that you are there in protest for that concept, but then once you see how things are going, if somebody Be very watchful. And that's where it's difficult. I, personally tell people, you're going to choose to do something like that, you're putting yourself in a very difficult stance. So be very careful. Okay, be very careful about that, and just be very observant as well of what you're deciding to do. But you're not going to see anything wrong from participating. It's when the things get out of hand is the problem. Okay, so we were still in the lesson 6. I think that last week we left off in 6.8. 6.8. And we've been talking about Shaul, which is known in the more Greek known as Paul. We know him as Paul. Why do we take some time to talk about Paul? Well, we take time to speak about Paul because Paul is probably the author of more than... Oops, sorry. Nope. Sorry about that. I think my eye... Oh, sorry about that. Give me a moment. I think my contact lens just fell out, so I apologize. Give me just one moment here. I'm going to put this on, if you don't mind. And I'm back. Sorry about that. I went to the eye doctor earlier today, and while I took Rose, they took me as well. And so we got a 2-for-1 deal in being seen. But I think I got something in my eye after they made me take out and put back my lenses. So I apologize for that. I think I can see now. All right. So we were talking about Paul. Paul, one of the biggest reasons we really study Paul is because Paul writes probably about, I would say, 1/3 of the what's known as the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament books. And most of the theology and doxology that we've been part of in the Western Church somehow has been attributed to Paul, even by misinterpretation of Paul. I think the poor guy, when he is risen and here's what we've done with his taking him out of context, I think he's going to be like, what? How did that happen? Because we've misquoted Paul in so many ways. And I know that because I've done that. I've looked at Paul in a very different light and forgotten that Paul is a very different person. Took me years to start figuring out that Paul was trying to say something different. In the last few years, I began to explore a little bit more about Paul, and as I was venturing more and more about what he was really trying to say, began to make more sense. A lot of the things that we used to believe, like, people would not really talk much about the fact that Paul sometimes sounded like he was schizophrenic, where he was like bipolar, going from one end of the spectrum to the other, and we would not understand why. Why would Paul say that and then say this? How come Paul says this and then later says that? And so it was something that we kind of asked, and somebody usually, all they would do to me, and I remember, was repeat the verses and say everything again, and it'd be like, yeah, don't you get it? And so the response was, yeah, okay, all right, cool. So Paul is saying something that sounds like it's counteracting, but it's not. So let's just move forward. Well, it never was sought out. So a few years ago, I began to research a little bit more about what Paul context was, and as I began to explore more, that is how I began to unfold these other things within the scripture, things that now we're not connecting, because how come, now that I understand Paul here a little bit, and Paul is trying to say this, but now here too, I'm seeing this here, now here I'm seeing this here. And then of course, talking to people, which is a fascinating part, people that claimed that they were very well versed in the Bible, very well versed in the scriptures, and then you hear them talk about Paul as if Paul was Jesus, and it's like, we're either followers of Jesus or we're followers of Paul. Which of the two is it? I mean, they're not one and the same. And Paul says it himself, they're not one and the same. He actually says, if you're following me, it's because you're following the Christ that's in me. So make sure that it looks like Christ. So if Paul is saying something that doesn't look like what Christ said, then either Paul is wrong or we're looking at it wrong. So Paul is already saying that if you're following me, it's because I'm following Christ, right? So the statement that Paul makes is like, I'm doing what Christ says. So you could either choose to compare Paul and then bring Christ into this and say, okay, where does Christ fit here? But the problem that we've been trained to do is when we look at it, we see these other anomalies that look so Hebrew Jewish that we were like, ooh, let's peel these things off because it's, it's not Jewish. It's Paul, and it's Jesus, and this has nothing to do with it. And that's the attitude we used to take. But now that we're looking at the entire scripture as a whole, we begin to see Jesus more as a rabbi, which is what we've done in lessons past. And once we begin to understand Jesus as a rabbi, we begin to see Paul as a lawyer, somebody who's very well versed into the law, somebody who's been very well trained, somebody who is a very devout believer. Probably, this would be considered, Paul would be like up there, like following every single thing that was being done towards God according to the customs and according to the Torah. Two things, right? Customs and Torah. And the customs were meant to lead to Torah. So customs are always designed to meet with the Torah. That was its design there. We call it traditions, right? And the whole idea, and this is a concept that we must kind of define, okay? We want to define clearly. We don't believe that traditions is what God wants us to do, okay? We believe that God wants us to do the Torah, the instructions. That's what he wants us to follow, right? But traditions are built in order for us to follow the commandments. So when we look at the traditions that we're doing, the traditions are meant to lead us there. So we can never hold traditions over Torah because Torah always goes over tradition. I'm going to say that again. We can never hold tradition over Torah. We always have to hold Torah over tradition. Big example. The fact that people walk into a church and they expect to see hymnals in the pews and Bibles in the pews. There is nowhere in the Bible that talks about that. That is a tradition that's been placed, that where churches and pews for the most part will have a Bible and or a hymnal available for people to use. But that's not in the Bible. It's a tradition. And some people will uphold tradition over the Bible. In other words, some people will focus more on making sure we have money to buy Bibles and hymnals than helping the family that's walking through the door who just lost their job and have no food in their pantry for the week. And we tell them, here's a $20 gift card from Walmart. Hope your week goes better. But we're willing to spend $500 in hymnals and books to keep sitting static, which people will really not use because people are supposed to have their own Bible, right? Because these are not Bibles that we're giving away unless we are. And so that is a tradition. That's a problem. When tradition becomes more important than obeying God, right? Like helping that family that comes in. So that's where we have a problem, and that's where Jesus is having a problem early on in the church when he's coming in and he's seeing all these things, is that people are focused more on their traditions to look outwardly like they're doing something for God, and they're so focused on that they forget the basics. They forget taking care of the widow and taking care of the orphan and taking care of the prisoner and taking care of the foreigner, making them feel welcome, and all these other things. It's just like completely forgetting about it, right? Because we're so focused on making sure that the traditions are perfect, that that can't miss. And we've forgotten the essence of the law, the essence of the instruction. In other words, we forgot really why we're doing